Daniela was a girl in her early 20s, struggling with poverty in Nicaragua. A seamstress by trade, desperate because she had 2 children to support. She was tricked by a group of people who offered her a loan. But after getting into a van with other girls, she was deceived, taken to Mexico, and handed over to the most bloodthirsty cartels in the north of the country. Daniela, just an alias to keep her identity hidden, was kidnapped to be a sex slave at the hands of these criminal associations. According to Daniela's statements, these groups make those deprived of their freedom do and see disgusting and undesirable things for any human being. This innocent girl was torn from the bosom of her family, taken to Mexico, abused countless times, and forced to transport merchandise of these groups. She was even forced to terminate a child with whom she had a close affinity for. She refused to do it, and delivering as a woman to a head of these organizations, among many other repudiatory activities. After 7 years in captivity, a subject she doesn't want to name helped her escape, which is how today we can listen to her story. What do you think of this inhumanity on the part of these groups? What should be done with them? Are they human? Or have they lost their humanity after spending years and years and years under the blanket of these criminal associations? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, and like our video. Nicaragua is a country of extreme poverty, which might have been one reason why these associations didn't develop their activities the way they did in Mexico, El Salvador, and Honduras. This 22-year-old girl, a seamstress by profession, was burdened with the responsibility of supporting 2 kids and her mother while earning minimum wage for her work. Then, in 2008, Daniela was invited to a meeting to assess whether her situation qualified her for a loan. Until then, there was no reason to be wary of this invitation because there was an absence of gangs in the country. The victim joined a group of 2 women and got into a van to attend the meeting. After a while, the van in which the women were traveling in broke down, which forced them to stop on the side of the road. At that moment, camouflaged and armed men came out of the bushes and moved them into other vehicles. Daniela joined 15 other women in this new vehicle, who had already been deprived of their freedom. After they set off again, their kidnappers took their IDs and forced them to tell them the addresses at which they lived. They were threatened and told that their families would pay the consequences if they lied. They were also given clothes to change into, and told that at every immigration checkpoint, they had to say that they were traveling to Chiapas, Mexico, for a tourist excursion. They crossed countries until they reached their first stop, Comitán, in the southern Mexican state. In the city, they took them to a table dance called El Babilonia, where women dance and they're forced to have sex with clients. There, they forced them to have sex with men who asked for it, taking their money afterwards. They made them do very humiliating things, and if one of the clients complained about the girl's inexperience, they were beaten so that they would learn. She was in this place for 2 weeks. After these weeks, the criminals put Daniela in a van with other women. All of them were relocated to different areas of the country. Her destination was Nuevo Laredo in Tamaulipas, a city on the border with the United States. After some time of being transported, one of her kidnappers, pretending to be brave because of the situation of power in which he found himself, smugly told her that she was with the Zetas. On the way to her destination, the criminals folded Daniela's eyes, and when they arrived, they forced her to get off the transport and go wherever her captors led her. When the blindfold was removed, she was in a mansion with many armed men. There were also other young women like her, who were sputtering spit and blood and were held in chains. These men in the mansion also forced them to have sex with them and beat them. Daniela was put to work in another table dance called El Dinesh, but again, the Zetas controlled this establishment. In this context, the young girl deprived of her freedom met Tonito, a 12-year-old boy who reminded her a lot of her younger brother. They became friends and confidants. Daniela was a dancer, and Tonito was an aide de camp. The boy performed various tasks for this repudiatory organization. He was a messenger, a waiter, hawk, and DJ. He was also rented to wealthy older men who paid to abuse him. Daniela and Tonito lived in different safe houses that and were only allowed to go to the table dance or a hotel with the clients. In the years that she was deprived of her freedom, she remained disconnected from the world. She didn't know what month, what year she lived in what place she lived. She had no television, no radio, nor was she even allowed to read. The less she knew about the outside world, the better. Sometimes, when she was talking with a client, some detail of the month they were in would come up in the conversation. But if anyone heard her ask anything inappropriate, she was punished. Daniela also stated in an anonymous interview that the goal with this kind of slaves is for the families to think that they're dead so that they'll just stop looking. During the first few years, her family searched tirelessly for Daniela. They reported her disappearance to national authorities, they went on television, they posted posters with her face on them. However, lack of money and exhaustion won the battle, and they stopped looking for her without reaching their goal. The punishments suffered by Tonio and Daniela for not satisfying the desires of their captors were almost irreproducible. She would have her legs burned with a hot iron for not knowing how to get off the dance pole. And the poor boy would have his food taken away to just inhuman limits if he cried during the abuses he suffered. These situations were constantly repeated, and it was how Tonio, growing up this way after a few years, developed problems in his intestines. He could no longer perform. He could no longer do what the cartel wanted him. After some time in the situation, they took Tonio and Daniela into the bush and confronted each other. First, they gave her a gun and ordered her to kill Tonito. When she naturally said no, they gave the gun to the boy and told him that he had to kill Daniela to save his life. The boy couldn't either. The Zetas, furious that neither of these two complied with their orders, took action themselves. They hung the teenager and began to cut him up. They blamed Daniela and they told her what was happening was her fault. In the end, they shot the boy. They put Daniela in a van and she never heard from him again. Daniela said that the invitation to kill the teenager was a test. If she killed him, then the cartel knows that she has what it takes to do those kinds of jobs. Otherwise, she would remain a slave and pass drugs to different cities. And we already know the result. The woman returned to being a slave and began smuggling products. In 2010, our main character witnessed a fearsome order from La Ardilla, Salvador Martinez Escobedo. This gentleman was known for shooting and then asking questions. He's responsible for the murder of 72 Central American immigrants from San Fernando, Tamaulipas. And the reason for this was that he suspected these 72 would reinforce enemies. Daniela witnessed this event and gave details in an interview, emphasizing that the worst and most inhumane of the subjects she met was Salvador Martinez. A year later, the Zetas began to break with the Gulf Cartel as their armed guard. Their firsts, encouraged by their growth in the state, separated from the latter and proclaimed themselves autonomous. In this conflict, many trafficked women died, but Daniela met with a different kind of fate. One of her original captors decided to stay on the side of the Gulf Cartel and demanded that she be his mistress. The first thing she did after being recognized as the mistress of El Viejon, the new boss of the Gulf Cartel, was to cut her foot and put a chip in it so he could locate her. Daniela thought that her life would be different due to this new situation, but it wasn't so. El Viejon sent her back to the table dance, her old routine. It was here that Daniela saw and learned most of the inhumane situations of her kidnapping. Murder of police officers, candidates for popular positions. The latter were replaced and handpicked by these criminal associations. Under this new group controlling the area, Daniela knew that the clients of the table dance were recorded from the moment that they arrived until they left. All of the rooms had cameras and microphones. Dealing with this kind of slaves was almost disposable. They were discarded when they didn't generate enough money or become addicted. Daniela said the cartel had a lion in the house in Reynosa. That was where they dumped the bodies for the animal to devour. One day, Daniela was put in charge of some hostages for whom they had not yet paid the ransom. She, empathizing with them, freed them. When El Viejo came back and noticed the situation, he set an exemplary punishment for his mistress. First, she was beaten until she almost fainted, and then the boss threatened to raze her to the ground with a tractor. Daniela gave detailed interviews about many of the activities of these groups, but she didn't want to specify details about her release. She only said that a person who knew about her kidnapping put her in the trunk of his car, and they left that place. And when she was released, they paid for her transportation to CDMX. So, what do you think? Can Daniela resume a normal life? Or does everything she saw and what they did to her make that just impossible? Don't forget to like our video, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.